eNCA that the scene is still active as traffic authorities try to clear the road. Now, South Africa's water crisis. Are we fast approaching a situation like we saw with Eskom when the country was plunged into the worst blackouts in 2023? Well, the current water infrastructure is a critical risk to business continuity, and while energy has been the primary focus for South Africa, various stakeholders are pressing that water infrastructure is equally a pressing issue. So let's give you a breakdown of what we're exactly talking about when we speak about the water infrastructure issues in South Africa that have led to basically a crisis in many parts. Let's take a look at that. So over the next few years, it has been indicated that we'll need about 900 billion rand to restore some of the dilapidated infrastructure that we have in the country. So that is the amount that has been put on the table to say this is what needs to be budgeted for. If we take a look at one of the biggest issues, which is leakages, let's just take a look at that. That costs in a financial year quite a significant amount of around 747 million rand in one financial year, and that's just on the leakages that we have seen happening in different parts of the country. And then if we take a look at the provinces that have been earmarked to say they need urgent assistance when it comes to restoring water infrastructure, it's the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal, and a report actually indicated that each province would need an average, not limited to, 1.5 billion rand to assist with the infrastructure issues that we have in these two provinces. Obviously, it is a countrywide problem. We've seen this happen in Gauteng as well, but these have been indicated as some of the worst suffering in the country. So with that, let's bring in Mike Smith. He's the principal at the Water Fund. A very good afternoon to you, Mike, and thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Now, you've indicated that the business or the risk to the continuity of business in South Africa is quite high given the major infrastructure issues that we have in South Africa. How so?
Hi, Rafia. Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, absolutely. Water risk is a very significant concern in our country at the moment. As you clearly pointed out, there's been a significant focus on energy for the longest time, and the concern is that water was really neglected during that time. And it needs to be tackled from a municipal, a government, a local, and a corporate level. And just as some of the examples that we're seeing recently, we're seeing rolling blackout type situations in Johannesburg, where communities, suburbs are being cut off from water for long periods of time, for days on end. And you can imagine that makes an impact at a household and domestic level, but at a mine or an industry, that means they can't produce. It simply shuts the industry down.
One of the big problems, as I indicated in my intro, Mike, is that we have a huge issue with funding. There's a big funding gap that exists, and one wonders, how do we even begin to bridge that gap so that we can start to see the restoration of this critical infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the core challenge at the moment. I think it needs to be tackled from different angles, and that is the complexity of water. Water is really difficult to finance because it's a complex delivery system. I would like to see it being tackled from two angles. I spoke recently at the South African Venture Capital Association conference, where we spoke about corporate and industrial projects, and we also spoke about the critical national infrastructure. So from a corporate and industrial level, there's real opportunity for reuse projects and for reclamation projects and for efficiency projects at an industry level. We've worked very recently with some poultry producers where we've put in technology to the tune of 80 million rand at the facility, and it's recovering 78% of their wastewater back to potable water that goes to the front of the factory. That makes a huge difference because it reduces the strain and the pressure on the local municipal infrastructure. And then at a critical national infrastructure level, we've got to be tackling it there too. You rightly pointed out one of the biggest issues, and we can see them on screen, is just the loss of water. And not just the loss of water, but also the loss of revenue when water is being essentially stolen. So We need to be tackling it there. We need to be tackling it at our treatment facilities, and really the whole supply chain needs our direct and intentional focus and funding.
And how important will it be to understand, Mike, that we don't necessarily need new infrastructure for water projects in South Africa, but also just the restoration of what exists so that we can have efficient municipalities?
I think that's a very good point, because we actually have very strong infrastructure networks in this country. I mean, if you look at the roads that we have compared to some of those that we see up north in Africa, the same is applicable for our water infrastructure. Yes, it doesn't reach everywhere where it needs to reach, but it certainly does a lot. And I think, maintenance, preventative and reactive maintenance has simply been missed for the last number of years, many years. And we've got to get those systems right and start patching the holes, so to speak. But there is a little bit more than that. There are some treatment facilities, water treatment facilities and wastewater treatment facilities that simply don't operate. They pass through systems, which means there's a risk to health and there's a risk to the environment, which ultimately ends up in a societal problem.
One of the big issues that you have discussed with various stakeholders is collaboration. And I wonder how easy this would be, Mike, because for investors or businesses to continue to invest in the municipalities in which they work, they need to see some form of commitment from government to pull their weight. So when you engage with government stakeholders, do they have that political will to say, we will make the policy changes so that business can meet us halfway?
Yeah, and again, a very good point. So I currently serve a dual role. I'm with a company called Talbot that is a water and wastewater service provider. And then as the water fund, we're raising money essentially through a pool of investor capital to finance water projects, both public sector and private sector. And there's many companies, many people like us who are very ready to provide our services, to provide our money to where it is needed. But the real challenge at the municipal level is the fear of non-payment. So obviously there has to be a revenue stream to ensure that you're going to be getting your investment back. And I think that's where the government needs to step in. There are some good initiatives taking place. The Development Bank of Southern Africa, through the Water Partnership Office, led by Johan Lubbe, is really looking at some opportunities and some great initiatives to essentially securitize or give people confidence that they're going to get their money back if they invest in public sector infrastructure. And that's really what is needed. You need the consistency of legislation, and you need the security that you're going to be getting your money back, and then the money will flow and the projects will take place.
Excuse the pun there with the money flowing, Mike, based on our conversation this afternoon. But thank you very much for your time, Mike Smith from the Water Fund, joining us this afternoon to discuss the risks to business if water infrastructure is not a focus point for government and, of course, related stakeholders. Now, increasing the number of on the zero-rated list for VAT will